Now we continue, as Nora mentioned, on CBS News 24/7 with this conversation. Let's go back to CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Major, we've been watching the handshaking down there on the floor. Looks like Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is the one a lot of people want to have photographs. What were your impressions as you watched now Vice President Kamala Harris go through that very procedure that now cements the 2024 election results?
So when you cover Congress, and I did so for almost 20 years, you hear a phrase, read, regular order. What is regular order? That's the process by which the rules of either the House or the Senate are followed and everyone agrees to follow them. Why does that matter? Because in times like this, regular order is what produces the stability that undergirds the peaceful transfer of power. The language read by the Vice President presiding over this process was very specific. The electoral certificates that she was counting were presented as regular in form and authentic. Those are not words that are just taken out of the dictionary randomly. They're part of the process by which we have historically decided that what happened in any given state is reflective of the vote in that state, and those electors therefore should be certified and credibly counted by Congress to convey not just to our country, but to the world that a peaceful transfer of power is about to commence and the election is over and now fully and completely verified and certified. Why do I bring that up? Because 4 years ago, there was a malevolent attempt inside the Trump White House to create alternate, non-regular, non-authentic certificates of the electors, phony ones, to masquerade as the intent of the voters in those disputed states, to overturn a verified and legally held presidential election. It was a shocking moment in American history. It will, regardless of the political verdict rendered in 2024 about January 6, 2021, always be a historical stain and a legal stain on this country. Regular order matters. What we are seeing is the preservation of regular order and, in no small part, its resurrection this afternoon here in Washington, D.C., and that it is bipartisan and collegial is, at one level, refreshing.
You know, Major, as a writer, one of my favorite books on writing is called The Situation and the Story, Vivian Gornick. The situation 4 years ago was what it was. The story was what it was, but now it seems that there's an evolution in the retelling of the story. Given the vast information the January 6th Commission came up with, will today get in the way of all of these truths being told for generations to come? This moving on sort of energy that we're seeing in Congress?
It will depend in great measure on the actions of the second Trump administration, because if the actions of the second Trump administration live within the contours of regular order, do not take on within the executive branch extravagant new powers that have never been claimed by a president to do things in regards to immigration or the military or other realms of American life. If the second Trump administration lives within the contours of our Constitution, of laws passed by Congress, of previous precedents, holding in and restraining some of the powers of the presidency, then it will mean one thing. If this second Trump term goes in excessive directions, new directions, and expands the power of the presidency or ignores legal challenges or tries to overturn regular order in Congress by some mechanism, political, persuasive, or otherwise, then we will have to look back on January 6, 2021 as a foreshadowing of new and aggressive powers within the executive branch to, if not topple, certainly rewrite the way we understand what regular order and process in this country is. So much of how we remember and how much of a turning point January 6, 2021 will depend on the actions of the second Trump administration. And to that point, let me make one thing very clear. There was a period of time after January 6, 2021, in which Donald Trump was in a kind of political wilderness. And the people who hung out with him then, who did not abandon him, despite what he did and what he helped foment on January 6, 2021, are part of his tightest inner circle now. He regards them as his chief and most important loyalists. So those who looked at January 6th and said, I see nothing wrong here, were close then, they are close now, they will be closer still inside the White House when he is inaugurated on January 20th.
Close now with an ear to the incoming president and arguably with a lot of power. Major Garrett, thank you so much for the conversation and for your years of covering Congress and helping us to see this through that context. We appreciate it. So let's talk about the what's next. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion live from Capitol Hill. Okay, Nikole, you saw it play out there. Striking there to watch Vice President Kamala Harris conduct the business of the people as she said she would. It's fascinating to look at how this could affect her personally and also politically. What are your impressions there about how the world will remember Kamala Harris after today politically?
Well, I think you saw her there get due respect from both sides of the aisle, certainly on the part of Democrats who gave her a standing ovation when she read out her name and the results, even though she was defeated by the president-elect. So from that standpoint, I think there is still a lot of admiration and appreciation for the very abbreviated campaign that she ran. And look, she made clear before she went into the chamber that she believes that this is a sacred obligation, serving as president of the Senate, serving as vice president, carrying out something that is constitutionally mandated. You know, she felt an obligation. I mean, at the end of the day, she is doing her job. And she told reporters as she headed into the chamber when she was asked about kind of how she was feeling and what this day means to her, she replied by saying that democracy should be upheld by the people. So she really is kind of stood there very stoically, even though it may have been very difficult for her personally to again kind of relive what was a very bitter and heated election. But at the end of the day, recognizing the greater good, the greater importance of fulfilling her constitutional duty by overseeing the certification of this election.
And then you see to her left, of course, Mike Johnson, who did not have an easy time last week when we talked in the nomination process when the lawmakers, I'm being told to go to someone else right now. So we're going to jump off of that question. Nikole, I thank you for your time. Let's go to, who are we going to, producer? You got my ear. Okay. CBS News election law contributor David Becker for more on this process. So take us through the process. And my apologies to Nikole. We should have let Nikole finish her answer there. But anyway, go ahead and take us through the process.
Yeah, I mean, what we just saw took about 30 minutes, and that was what it should be. It's just counting electoral votes that we already know exist. We already know the outcome. Vice President Harris did her duty as every other vice president has done before, including Vice President Pence, including Vice President Gore, who oversaw the certification of his own defeat, including Vice President Nixon, who oversaw the certification of his own defeat in 1961. And so we should remember that by this time, 4 years ago, the House was already, or the Congress was already under siege. There were members of Congress who were fleeing, who were hiding. There were calls to hang Mike Pence. And at this point, what we just saw was exactly as it's always been done in every year but 2021 in modern American history, which is members of Congress performed their duty. We didn't see a single objection to any of the state's electoral votes. All of the electoral votes were regularly given, and this is as it should be.
All right, and I'll ask you the same question I was going to ask Nikole Killion there. You saw almost a cordial sense there between now Vice President Kamala Harris and House Speaker Mike Johnson. That could be a double-edged sword for him politically, because we know that some of his detractors there, his Republican detractors in Congress, felt like, given the bipartisan nature of the spending bill and some of his work to reach across the aisle, was a political liability for him. How did you read what went on between Kamala Harris and the Speaker?
I think it was just a very human moment between two public servants who obviously have a lot of disagreements politically. Speaker Johnson was seeing the certification of the presidential election that he was happy with. He was happy with the outcome. Vice President Harris clearly wasn't. But it's important to see these leaders acting as human beings in a cordial manner. Major Garrett mentioned this before. This is the way it's supposed to be done. This is the most ceremonial and ministerial thing Congress is going to do. This should be the least contentious thing that Congress is going to do. Much less contentious is what we saw in the election of a speaker just a few days ago. And so this should be the moment for everyone to come together and just acknowledge what the American people decided. That's what they did. Kudos to them for that. They shouldn't be doing anything else, but obviously it stands in stark contrast to what we saw just 4 years earlier when members of Congress who were trying to do their duty were under attack.
Well, and before we leave you in about 20 seconds, it bears mentioning that the next time we will see these leaders close together will be Inauguration Day, when President-elect Donald Trump, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will share the stage on Inauguration Day with outgoing President Joe Biden and outgoing Vice President Kamala Harris. Thank you so much for joining us.